It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back from talking about recording another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 deck with the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB. Always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description below. As well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the videos, like, comment, subscribe. Consider checking out the links in the description. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're going to keep going on our Aether Drift train, and we looked at white-green mounts and vehicles last week. So today we're going to take a look at the other head of the 10 racing teams, the one that's in Boros, Kolodin Triumph Caster. 2-man, 2/3 human pilot. This says mounts and vehicles we control have haste. Whenever a mount enters, it becomes saddled till a turn, and whenever a creature enters, it becomes an artifact creature till a turn. Very interesting ability. And something I really like because it's going to pay off us being able to cast those big vehicles or those big mounts the turn they come in and make them really useful. Also, if we have any way to get them back from the graveyard, right, then they're going to come back in and be able to do that. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. We're going to talk about the mounts and vehicles we're going to play. We're talking about even though they get auto crewed and saddled when they come in, on future turns they won't. Right, so we'll talk about ways we're going to try to crew and saddle our creatures on future turns, and then we do get to play off some artifact matter type stuff because we are actually still playing more vehicles than mounts, so we can kind of talk about it that way. But as far as mounts go, we're playing a few, but I think these are the main three mounts that are going to be the most important for us. Bulwark Ox says that when it attacks while saddled, we get to put a counter on our creature we control. And then we could sack it to give all of our creatures with counters on them hexproof and indestructible. This pays off really well into our colors because white has a lot of way that we can spread counters out, so Bulwark can be great for that. Guardian Sunmare says that whenever it attacks while saddled, we can search our library for a non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less and put on the battlefield. This is helpful because a couple of our creatures that crew or saddle really well are mana value 3 or less, or this can go get things like mana rocks, right? So there's different ways that you could take advantage of this ability. And then Unswerving Sloth says that when it attacks while saddled, it gets indestructible, and we untap all creatures we control. So that will untap whatever vehicles, right, that were crewed and the creatures that crewed them, making sure that we could crew them defensively. So although we aren't playing as many mounts as vehicles, there still are some good mounts for us to play. But as far as the vehicles go, I think this is where we have a lot of options for vehicles. I've tried to choose vehicles that are just going to be as much value for their cost as possible and for their crew cost, making sure that we can fulfill them. So Aerial Surveyor says when it attacks, if we have less lands than the player it's attacking, we can search our library for basic planes and we're going to tap. Again, just a great way to ramp, and we could pick the player we're attacking, so we could potentially, right, constantly be getting that if possible. Brotherhood Vertibird is going to get bigger for the number of artifacts we control. A great way to just take advantage of that and make it a big attack in the air. Cybership's a huge 8/8 in the air, and if it actually hits a player, we get to put the top 2 cards of their library face down as 2/2 Cybermen, continuing to be able to crew it and keep it going to attack more and more for our opponents. Horde Hauler, when it hits a player, we create a treasure for each artifact they control, allowing us to fund, right, some future turns with future vehicles. Mighty Servant of Luco says whenever it becomes crewed for the first time each turn, if it was crewed by exactly 2 creatures, it can draw 2 cards this turn when it hits in combat damage. It's a 6/6 with trample. And then Mech Titan is just a ton of fun. We can pay 5 and exile it and 4 other artifacts, creatures, or vehicles to make a 10/10 big Mech Titan token with flying, vigilance, trample, lifelink, and haste that's all colors. And when that token leaves the battlefield, whether it was destroyed, whatever, we get to bring all cards that we exiled with Mech Titan to make it accept a Mech Titan back to the battlefield tap. So kind of a way to make a big Megazord, and then if it leaves the battlefield, you get the pieces back, which could be really nice for the purposes of making sure we have lots of things on board. Not Ship exiles an opponent's graveyard when it comes in, and then when it deals damage to anybody, we can put a creature card from that pile onto the battlefield, which is nice depending on which players we're playing. We could pick the right graveyard and bring it back. Peace Walker Colossus has the ability to turn other vehicles into creatures, which is really nice. Especially if we don't have the creatures at the time to crew a certain vehicle, but we really need it to be crewed. Parhelion is one of 2 big top-end vehicles we have, Flying First Strike Vigilance, and whenever it attacks, you make 2 4/4 angels with Flying and Vigilance that are attacking. No, not tapped and attacking. they're just attacking. So that's nice because then you can use them on future turns to either crew the Parhelion so it can block, or on other turns, which is or other things. Recron Caft Theta comes in and makes a little token that can hopefully crew it, and it says when it attacks, you can proliferate. So if our creatures are having counters, they're going to get more counters on that. And we do have some synergy in the deck for that. Rolling Hamster is a big pile of fun. +1/+1 for each hamster we control, and whenever it attacks, you make 3 hamster tokens and deal X damage to any target where X is the number of hamsters you control. So just turn after turn, hamsters making more hamsters, getting bigger, and attacking our opponents. And then the hamsters are great to either attack or start crewing our things. Salvation Engine is not the other one I was referring to with Parhelion, but it is a big vehicle, a 5-mana 6/10 that buffs all of their artifact creatures. And then whenever it attacks, we can actually bring an artifact from our graveyard back to the battlefield, which is nice to be able to have it for its ability, or just to have a vehicle up for defense. Skyseer's Chariot, when it comes in, we choose a non-land card name, and activated abilities of that name cost 2 more to activate. There's a lot of ways to look at this. I mean, I think the obvious one is, there are 2 artifacts that are always going to be used. Every deck, Arcane Signet and Soul Ring. There's options like that. Or if one of your opponent's commanders has an activated ability, I think it's a great choice. And it's just not a bad 3/3 vehicle in the air that crews for 2. The Perdwin is a 6/6 flyer, and it says that whenever another non-token artifact enters, we can make a 2/2 knight with this creature gets +2/+2 as long as an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So it could potentially be 4/4s right on future turns. Thunderhawk Gunship gives all attacking creatures flying as long as when it attacks, so it allows you to get in the air and get some big damage. Not all of our vehicles are in the air, but the rest of our creatures aren't, so this is going to help us get everything in the air. The other big vehicle we have is Valor's Flagship, same thing, flying, first strike, lifelink. It has a crew of 3, and then it does have the option to cycle it, and we cycle it, we can make a couple pilots, but I think ideally you want the flagship down so it can be gaining you that life. It's a big 7/7. Unlicensed Hearse is probably one of the only vehicles in our deck that is really bad to, is probably really the only one that's bad to play into Kolodin. And that's because it's a star where stars the number of cards exiled with it, and you tap it to exile 2 cards from a single graveyard. With Kolodin out, it will actually die immediately because it's a 0/0 and it'll become an artifact creature. So it's really the only one in the deck that we don't want to play with Kolodin out. But it's a great way to grow it over the course of the game, getting it bigger and bigger each turn. And then whatever deals damage to a player, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, you reveal a historic card from among them and put it in your hand, put the rest of the bottom. So remember, historic is artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So artifacts make sense, legendaries make sense. We're going to have a few of those, and it means that we can search out for them. As far as crew and saddling goes, there's a lot of ways to approach this, and there's even more than just this. You have something like Astor, which gives all of our vehicles crew 1, making sure that we have a lot of ways to crew, right? All of our vehicles, and then when it comes in, we can look at the top 7 and actually get a vehicle from among them to our hand. Cloudspire Captain buffs all of our mounts and vehicles, and it says it can crew and mount as though its power were 2 greater, so up to 4. And then Interface Ace is a great new one. It saddles and crews equal to its toughness rather than its power, and 1 time per turn, we can untap it if it becomes tapped, meaning you can technically crew or mount up to twice, crew or saddle up to twice, which is huge. For the purposes of making sure we get our vehicles that didn't come in this turn, crewed up and ready to attack. But I think it's not just playing the vehicles that matters. We also want to pay off that the vehicles are around, and there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of different effects. I just tried to hit the gambit here on having value all over the board. Duretti Scrap Savant can actually bring a artifact from our graveyard back to the battlefield by sacrificing another one. This kind of has a fun loop of maybe sacking a vehicle that's already there that you don't want as much and getting one back from your graveyard. And if you have Kolodin out, right, it gets haste, so it's good to go. Digside Engineer can either help you get crewers or help you get threats. Whenever you cast an artifact, you can pay 2, and if you do, you get a construct that grows for each artifact you control. I think in the early game, these are crewers, and then in the late game, these are just huge threats for your opponents to deal with. Wanderglyph is another great one that helps buff our artifact creatures. So if we have the City's Blessing, so if we've gotten at least 10 or more permanents, we get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, buffs all of our artifact creatures by +2/+2, and then at the beginning of everyone's turn, we get a 1/1 gnome, right? That'll be 3/3 with Wanderglyphs out, which again, just become great crewers for our things and or just a force of creatures on the ground. Lead at the start of our end step is going to untap all of our artifact creatures, then herself, which is great because then your vehicles are going to untap, and maybe the creatures that crewed them are going to untap, depending. And then for 4 mana, you can make a vehicle named Zeppelin flying in crew 3, so you can actually get some more vehicles for yourself. And remember, with Kolodin, that Zeppelin could technically always have haste right on the turn it comes down and take a big attack. SRAM's going to draw us cards whenever we cast vehicles, and Start Your Engines can actually have all of our vehicles become creatures for the turn and get +2/+0. All creatures get +2/+0. So a nice big alpha strikey type card. Same thing with Armed and Armored. All of our vehicles become creatures until end of turn, allowing them to take a big attack. Alacrity and Armor is kind of interesting. So it gives all of our creatures +0/+1 in Vigilance. So that's nice because then our vehicles could potentially be crewed to block, right? But it says the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to one mount or vehicle you control. At the end of the turn, either becomes saddled or crewed, which is nice for the purposes of some vehicles, right? Especially the huge ones. Making sure we don't have to pay that cost, and giving them that buff is huge. And then Mirage Mirror, right? A way to have it become a copy of another vehicle or another thing and get some abilities. You know, maybe you have it copy the Alacrity and Armory and get to automatically crew 2 a turn. You know, there's a lot of ways you can look at Mirage Mirror, and I think it's really important to have things like that to help you out. Mirrorwork says whenever another non-token artifact comes in, you can pay 2. If you 2, you make a copy of it. This is really nice to copy our vehicles, especially since not every vehicle we're playing is legendary, right? Meaning that we can get a couple nice copies of that. But this also just says non-token artifacts, so this would count for mana rocks. This would count for a lot of other things as long as they're not, legendary, because otherwise we can't have 2 copies of the same legendary thing. But I think Mirrorworks is going to help us a ton just for a lot of things. And then as far as crewers go, same thing with like Digsite Engineer. I also kind of look at it the same way I look at Thousand Moon Smithy. So it comes in and makes a gnome soldier. It's a star where star's the number of artifacts and or creatures we control, so it's going to grow over time, right? And at the start of our main phase, our first main phase, we can tap 5 untap artifacts or creatures to flip it over. And on the backside, it adds, it's a land that taps for a white. But if we use it to cast an artifact or creature, we get another one of those gnome soldiers. So again, just like Digsite Engineer, my philosophy here is you either get crewers early game, or you start to get huge threats, right, at the later portions of the game to be threats to your opponents, except, other than your vehicles. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Kolodin. I think there's a lot to learn in testing. Mainly, there's a lot of these things like Sculpting Steel and Mirage Mirror that can make copies of it can either come in as copies of something or make copies of something. The other thing I'd be looking at here would be also something like the Jolly Balloon Man. Like, there's a lot of ways to make copies of things. Like Curse Mirror can also come in as a copy of something the turn it comes in, whereas Sculpting Steel just comes in as a copy of anything. But like, there are also ways to make a copy of a creature for the turn. Like, is that something that's worth looking into? Is that something we can use to kind of find a key vehicle on the board and make multiple copies of it? I don't know, but I think that's an option. And then I'm not playing a ton into extra combats, but it makes sense if a vehicle is going to come in with haste or, and that kind of thing. Maybe it's worth having it. Extra combat, something like Full Throttle or some other extra combat-y type stuff, just to take multiple combats in a turn to hit our opponents. But let's get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to determine what the best plays our deck can make. It's to start our games off in a goldfish environment to see how we would maneuver our deck for the first 3 turns to get ourselves set up and to start building a board state. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with a Boros Signet. We got Daretti, we got Nautilus Ship, and we got Unidentified Hover Ship. When it comes in, we can exile a creature with toughness 5 or less. When it leaves the battlefield, the owner of that card manifests dread, so they don't even get it back. We could potentially just straight exile something with it. So turn 1, we'll just get a land in. I think our goal here is still just to get the Boros Signet down turn 2. I know that Kolodin is 2 mana, but I think we still want to make sure that we're ramping well. So here we can Boros Garrison and pick up the Plains. That would give us still 3 mana this turn. Or we can Sundown Pass and have 4, right? If I'm only going to have 3, I think the answer is still Kolodin. If I'm going to have 4, then it's still Kolodin, right? Because we want it to get down so that all these vehicles that come in have haste. I think we'll pick up the Garrison. We'll pick up the Plains with the Garrison and play Kolodin just to get it set up for next turn, right? Because my thought here is now, turn 4, we've got 5 mana. We can play the Nautiloid ship with haste, right? That hover ship can come in with haste. We could get Duretti down and pitch a couple cards and draw, if we wanted to, which the nice part there is, remember that Duretti could then bring it back. So, you could Duretti pitch the Rolling Hamsphere, right? And then Duretti could sack an artifact to bring the Hamsphere back, right? So there's options there. Unfortunately, I can't Duretti and Mirage Mirror. So I think, the problem with Nautiloid ship to my head is there's probably not enough. There's not nothing with a big enough graveyard quite yet. So maybe if somebody has a key mana dork or a key early game creature, maybe you go for something like the hover ship just to take it out. But otherwise, I kind of think I would Duretti. My thought is pitch the Hamsphere so we can get it back. You could even get it back by sacrificing something like the hover ship. I kind of want to draw the second card. I'm just not sure what to get. I guess we'll just pitch the Hamsphere. And we see Valor. So Valor might even be another great thing to put right in the graveyard. And then, coming back to our next turn on turn 5, now, right, 5 mana. My thought is play the hover ship. And then -2 Duretti, right? Going back down to 3, sack an artifact, return 1. So we get to return the Hamsphere back, right? Now the Hamsphere comes in. It gets to attack this turn, right? Because it has haste because of Kolodin. And what I kind of like about this game plan, if you think about it, or anything that's going to bring artifacts back from our graveyard or the battlefield, is we kind of get to play that Greasefang game plan. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Greasefang's coming up on the channel. Where we can pitch things into the graveyard and get them back. So now you got a nice attack with the Rolling Hamsphere this turn. Got some damage to deal out. So then on our next turn, we can do the same thing, right? We could pitch the Valor's Flagship to Duretti, right, to set it up for the future turn. Or we have something like Born to Drive, which gives a creature +1/+1 for each creature or vehicle you control. My thought here is you could do something like that on Kolodin, right, to give it a little bit of a buff, since we know this Hamsphere can crew itself this turn with the hamsters. I think I would tick up Duretti, pitch the Flagship. My thought is to keep the Mirage Mirror so that it's something we can use to, right, sack to Duretti to get the Flagship back. Crew the Hamsphere, right? It makes 3 more hamsters, dealing out a bunch more damage to it. Now it's up to a 10/10, right? This is now a 8/8, right? So Kolodin's a 10/11, right? Because of that Born to Drive. And so now Kolodin's becoming a huge threat, potential commander damage threat, right, on next turn. Because now my thought is this turn, we tick back down Duretti. We could even just sack the Boros Signet. And we could even make a... But I think we sack the Mirage Mirror to bring Valor's Flagship back. Remember, it gets to be a creature in haste because of Kolodin. And we haven't even spent a mana this turn. So we could get the Luoco down just in case, either of these guys die. Remember, it gets haste this turn because of its ability. And we can keep the Boros Charm up. And now my thought is go to attack, make 3 more hamsters. Rolling Hamsphere is huge. Kolodin's huge. We've got the protection of the Boros Charm. And then maybe we can block for Duretti with the hamsters, right? Keep it alive that way. Because the nice thing of the hamsters is, right now the hamsters are going to kind of be our crewers, right, on future turns for our vehicles. I think that's a good place to stop on that one. We kind of got to a nice place. We've got the organic extinction kind of to back it up. It's going to kill basically all of the hamsters and the Kolodin if we had to, but I think we're willing to do it. And the nice part is if any of these 3 die, you just Duretti it back by getting rid of one of the other ones, or what have you. I think we're in a pretty good shape there. Playtest number 2, keep it a 3-lander with a Talisman. We see the Hearse, we see the Bulwark Ox, and we see the Colossus. So not a bad start. This time we're seeing some different of those. I think I'll put the Hanger down. Well, I guess we still want to work our way towards Kolodin. But my thought is here, since I have the Hearse before I have Kolodin, right, I think it makes more sense to get the Hearse down before Kolodin, right? Because Kolodin automatically makes it a creature, right? So that's my worry with with Hearse is I don't want it to automatically die. Here, play the Talisman into Kolodin. So now the Hearse could have haste, but again, as soon as somebody has 2 cards in their graveyard, we're going to do it immediately, right, to get the Hearse started up. So here, we could Peace Walker Colossus, but I think here it just makes more sense to do the Wanderglyph. Get this started. We're at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 already, which means by the time we come back around to our turns, we're gonna have the City's Blessing online. And now, of course, we grow the Hearse when we can. We can crew it with the gnomes, but here I'm thinking maybe something like Astor. We get to look at the top 7 and put a vehicle in our hand. Vertibird's great, considering all those gnomes are artifacts, right? That could be a good option. Severe, I think, is fine. I think it's Vertibird there, only because, right, it's already doing really well with all those gnomes we have, and it gets the buff from the Wanderglyph. I've got, what, 2 mana left? So we can play the Bulwark Ox, and it gets haste and is automatically saddled this turn, right? So I think it probably just puts counter on itself. I guess we could put it on Kolodin to protect it. Actually, now I think about it, I think we put it on the Wanderglyph, right? Protect it, so that way it can keep itself, right, alive. And then the Bulwark can attack, put the counter on there. And then as we come into our next turn, now we have more gnomes. So now the gnomes are becoming a threat, right? Because they're 3/3s. I like the Vertibird. Again, it becomes a creature this turn that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's a huge creature. I'm thinking it plus the Weatherlight, right? They both become creatures till end of turn. We just use one of the gnomes to saddle Bulwark so that it can, hit. Maybe we put it on Kolodin. Well, I think it makes more sense to put it on Vertibird. Well, it actually makes more sense to put it on Astor to keep that, right, vehicle's crew 1 alive. But again, attack this turn. The Vertibird's going to hit something huge in the air. The Weatherlight's probably going to hit somebody in the air. So we get to reveal the top 5 and get something historic. The Shield's great. Can protect your creatures attacking. We saw the Rolling Hams for last one. Strike Hanger, Automaton might be good up against Wanderglyph just to get an extra Thopter every turn. I mean, either way, we can't put any of them down this turn. I like the Shield just because it'll actually draw us a card every turn with Wanderglyph. They get plus Automaton. I mean, either of them, I just seem like they're probably both great options. And then I think we're in a great space here. Unless somebody wipes the board, which remember we could sack the Bulwark Ox to at least protect these 2. Remember, these 2 won't be creatures during our opponent's turn, right? So it would protect these 2, kill all these, and then the Wanderglyph will keep printing gnomes, right, to be able to crew. And I think we're just in a pretty good spot there to just try to keep leveraging those gnomes to end the game. Let's get into Playtest number 3, keeping a 4-lander with a Soul Ring. Chrome as well, a nice Alpha Striker, and then the Automaton. So we just need something to make the tokens with the Automaton to make that good to go. The Henge, you can pay 4 to look at the top 5 and get something historic. So again, most of our deck, right? Well, there's a Cultivator's Caravan. Not a bad way to start. Can make some mana, and it's a vehicle. Turn 2, we see the Aether Spark. Put it in here for some fun. Felt like it led the role, especially to potentially draw some cards or get some mana depending on what it's attached to. Here I can actually go Caravan into Kolodin. So not going to make the Caravan into a character or creature this turn, but that's okay because it's still there for the mana. Now we've got 5 outside of the Caravan, but 6 if we want to use the Caravan. I could get the Aether Spark in. It would go on to Kolodin, making it a 3/4, and then if we can hit, right, it would go up. I think that could make a ton of sense. It could also be the Automaton, but I kind of like that as an idea. So if the Kolodin hits, let's say it does, that goes up to 8, right? We didn't end up crewing the Cultivated Colossus this turn. The Henge is going to come in tapped, unfortunately, because it did come in this turn. We could play Salvation Engine. Remember, it comes in, and it's going to come in with haste because of a Kolodin. we've got 3 mana technically left. We could play the Stride Hanger, although I don't think it's going to get me anything. I think it's still worth playing for the purposes of just having it there. Now the question would be, do we switch the Aether Spark over to the engine? Or leave it on Kolodin? I guess the question is, which has a better chance of attacking? I mean, if there's somebody who's wide open, obviously the answer is it doesn't matter. Either of them can get the Aether Spark up to 10 in order for us to add mana if we want to do that. My thought here is, I think either way, let's say we keep it on Kolodin. I think this turn I would put it back down to draw 5. Just set up my hand for next turn, keep the party rolling, and, just try to feed more cards into our hand. Now we're at 8 mana, 7 if we don't want to use the Caravan. We're getting into nice Chroma's Will territory, depending on how we do this, but we do need to now crew this Salvation Engine, right? So it's that, but we do have something like Start Your Engines, right, as an option there. We just can't do both, right? We would need 8. We can. We have enough mana for the Salvation, Start Your Engines plus the Chroma's Will, but the problem right now is we'd have to tap the Caravan. Only be this, and I don't know that that's the best right use of that. I think I'd want to commit more to the board before I do that. Because we could do the Guide Car, right? It's gonna it comes in right as a creature because of Kolodin's ability, right? I kind of like the idea of leaving the Legion leadership up, just in case Kolodin goes unblocked. We could potentially double his power and get more counters on the Aether Spark. But I also could conversely, it's 3. I was going to say, could I get it on the engine somehow and get a nice attack in? Either way, I think we're going to just end up with a couple on it. And then, again, the goal would be to I think either way between the 3 of these, we can find a way to get something in and get some counters on it. I was going to say draw 5. I don't really care about pitching lands at this point, because I think we have plenty of mana, right? I think now it's just getting some things on the board, right? And then the next turn here, now we're at 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. So we could do the Start Your Engines, Chroma's Will game plan, but it might even make sense to wait another turn, play something like the Cyber Ship, play the Tempered Steel to buff all of our creatures. It becomes a creature this turn. Now it can make those Cyberman artifact creatures, and then maybe this is a Chroma's Will next turn. Now that we know we have it sitting around and we can wait, maybe we let these vehicles kind of get us some more value before we commit to it. The nice thing about the Salvation Engine is that if it attacks, right, I can bring something back from the graveyard. So we could, try to put something there that way. But the only downside from that Stride Hanger is we just never got to make a token. But that's okay. I mean, there are other ways in the deck to do it. So we just didn't hit the one that we needed to. But again, I still think we've got a decent board state, and Start Your Engines plus that of Chroma's Will is going to lead to be pretty lethal when we do it, especially the next turn, because you're talking about all these becoming creatures. Everything gets +2/+0, and then we have Chroma's Will to make them all in the air, double strike, lifelink, and we're just in grand old shape. But let me know, what do you think of Kolodin down in the comments section below? It's an interesting deck. I think it's fun. I don't know how I feel about Boros vehicles. In a week or two, we're going to cover Dapala, who I think is probably the most popular of this color's choices for vehicles. So we'll see what you guys think with Dapala when we get there. So if you're interested, Dapala is coming. But I'd love to know what you think of Kolodin down in the comment section below, and I will catch you all in the next